today we're talking about business plans and goals. And many academics, they usually talk about a variety of different academic analysis, such as the SWOT analysis and the PESTEL analysis. We'll be talking about that. Overall, planning. The research shows a lot of people talk about businesses failing or plans failing, but more accurate research shows from actual financial numbers of companies from, for example, the Canadian Tax Department. It shows, provided you are serious, and that generally means you write things down and you invest in at least writing, as long as you write things down, the chances of you being successful are much, much higher than most people say. And I'm going to quiz you about that later. But if we look at this, what this says is that whether it's your own life plan or business plan, you should write details about what you want to achieve. What are your goals for 10 to 20 years? And then after you have those goals, it's easiest to work backwards. I've talked about this a little bit in the past. I'm just going to go through it briefly. If you plan for in 20 years, you want very specific SMART goals. So it's specific for SM as in SMART, S-M-A-R-T. So it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. This is the 20-year time-based. And then in half of that time, 10 years, you need half of that. And then in 5 years, half of the time, you need half the foundation to set that up. And then 2.5 years, 1 year, 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, 2 months, 2 weeks, 1 week to today. And then we go through these details related to the Highly Effective People book. They talk about first things first. Another book, it identifies Q4. You should identify weekly and daily activities that you're going to be doing and prioritize them so that you focus on the most important things which will get you your goals. And usually, because you're planning 20 years ahead, they're not urgent, but they're most important. Other than the next category over here would be an accident or a crisis. You need to take care of that, but you can't plan for that. So whatever you're thinking about, think about your steps to get closer to your goals. Who can help you? What activities can help you? How can you get at least to those higher levels and maybe have those higher level people or activities pull you up to a higher floor? That's much easier than just hiking up each stair one by one. So if I expand on this Q4, we see that there's 4 squares basically divided by important at the top and not important at the bottom, and not urgent over here on the right and urgent over here on the left. A lot of people might say that the important and urgent is the most important. That's where you should focus your time. And that's not true. This is stuff that you don't plan. And it's only a small accident that, yes, you need to manage, but that's not what you plan to focus on. You should be planning to focus on as much of your time and energy as possible into this important, but not urgent. These are the long-term plans and prevention of problems, value clarification, exercise, relationship building, etc. So if we go through that, here's some different examples. I like my art. Anybody else here like my art? Any idea why I'm using this picture? Most people follow whatever anybody else is doing in front of you, and they follow their mom and dad. It's just it's a thing of respect, and it's a comfortable, easy thing to do. But stand back and look at it, and if you see sheep will follow whatever the dog is pushing them into the barn where they get their heads chopped off. So before you walk into some area with a group of other people, make sure you're not going to be dying or having your head cut off. Maybe people will say you're a black sheep and you're strange if you don't follow them. And so that's why we're saying you're the black sheep. But it's better to be a rebel than to go and follow other people into activities that don't make sense, if not hurt. Many people don't realize a lot of people get a job, work their whole life until they hope to retire at 65 years old. And then when they're 65, they realize they can't do those dreams they had. And so please think about that and start and talking about it. We can talk about that quite a bit. The next thing is this Q4 thing. As we see here, the First Things First book. If you go through this First Things First book, you realize that you could have dozens or hundreds or thousands of things to do each day or week. And most of them will be wasting your time, like checking your email or checking your phone every couple of seconds, or talking to friends, answering chats with friends. Those things may be popular to do and your friend might give you a headache if you don't answer quickly, but it's wasting your time. Research shows you get a lot more accomplished if you just check your email 2 or 3 times a day. Maybe at 9 a.m., check your email and text, and then again at maybe 1 p.m., and then maybe again just before you go home. If you do it that way, you can get a lot more done. You're not distracted. You have better concentration and things. So if you list these hundreds or thousands of things, you can see that there's tasks to accomplish your dreams. That's most important. That's what you should focus on first. Then your daily important activities like play or sleep or eating or studying or friends or partying, getting drunk, having sex, whatever. Those are all important. Nothing else is more important than that to plan on. And so this is a new sort of topic. Many people usually gossip about how new businesses or plans usually fail. Well, yes, a lot of plans fail if they're not serious. The more serious your plan, starting with being able to write it down. If it's not written down, if you're not serious enough to write something, then you're definitely not serious about it at all. So if you write things down, the Canadian government shows 89.2% of all finance and insurance industry new startups survive longer than 5 years. All real estate operators and insurance agents, they survive longer than 88.6%. They survive beyond, they're likely to survive beyond 5 years. Business services, etc. Even fish farming, things like that. So the truth is, as long as you're serious and you have a written plan, you are likely to survive more than 5 years. The idea of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, thinking of your environment is huge. For example, in Asia, you're group oriented. So you are looking at the group and you're part of a group. Even though it's one individual company yourself working, you're still usually part of a big group. And so you are helping the group. And so to help the group, if some family or somebody else in the group, if they can't live because you're too expensive, that's bad. So they give you a product with a very small profit margin so that if you can be successful, you're going to buy more from them and you will be successful. So they think more of the other person in the group. If they are successful, they will pull me up. We get back to that idea of this ladder. If you work with other people and the other people are successful and they can pull you up, you get a lot more benefits. So if we're talking about it again with the Western person, usually they're individualistic. They're just thinking, doesn't matter what other people think. If I can get somebody to pay $10 for the pen, jackpot, I'm lucky. But that is just looking for one sale at a time versus if you have 1 cent profit or 10 cents profit and 1 million customers, that's if one customer goes bankrupt, you still have 999,000 other customers that could help you grow. So that is a huge cultural difference. And you must decide how you're going to work with it. If you rely just on one person for your business, super risky. If you rely on several different organizations to help you get successful, that's much safer. So that's a good concept. The other thing I want to be clear about with pricing, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying try to be the cheapest. Usually the cheapest can never win because somebody may be going out of business or selling their old supplies or trying to give them away. You can't make profit when somebody's just giving it away. So the idea of Walmart type of company, it's the odds, the statistics show you're more likely to fail if you're trying to be the lowest cost. What Walmart is successful at is the same thing as IKEA. They are successful at logistics, being able to get products the cheapest and fastest way to the market, cheaper than anybody else. And so because they can do that better than others, that's why they're winning. And it's just a bonus that it's the lowest cost. With this, you see that with the SWOT analysis, everybody's probably heard of it. The external is talking about the opportunities and the threats. Your internal environment is your strengths and weaknesses. Anybody can list these. And for any product, any service, you can think of these. However, a lot of MBAs and new businesses, they make a big problem. It's they think of one strength, one weakness, one opportunity, one threat, and then they manage those. Well, that's foolish because there's usually many, many, many strengths and many weaknesses, many opportunities, many threats. Write them down, get them all listed. Ask somebody else what could be another threat and how could we manage it? And then go beyond that. If you do have a strength, how are you going to use your strengths to grow even more? Don't forget Pareto's law. You want to focus on 80% of your benefit comes from 20% of your activities. So keep focusing those benefits more and more so you're more of a specialist in those strengths. And at the same time with the weaknesses, what are you going to do to overcome those weaknesses? Some people try to keep studying the weakness. Other people say, no, you should focus on your strengths and maybe outsource your weaknesses to somebody that might be better. So that idea of the SWOT analysis is one thing that we're thinking about. Another academic analysis is PESTEL, the idea of political environment, the economic environment, social environment, technical environment, legal environment, environmental environment. All of these details generally must be analyzed. And if we look back, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, in my mind, it's the exact same thing. So a SWOT analysis and a PESTEL analysis are basically the same thing. Who, what, where, when, why. Start thinking about the details and start with the most important questions. One of the important questions is, what makes you competitive? What is your competitive advantage? What are your competitive forces? And so that has been researched and developed. And the most famous person for that is Michael Porter. He wrote in the Harvard Business Review 2008, there's 5 forces that shape your industry competition and your competitive advantage, your competitive forces. As you can see here, it's the idea of your the competitor rivalry, barriers to entry, threat of substitutes, supplier power, buyer power. So competitors, it's probably pretty clear. Barriers to entry, what that means is, like I said, with pharmaceuticals. With pharmaceuticals, you have to, or semiconductor equipment design and manufacture, most of those factories, or fabs is what they're called, cost about $1 billion to make. So if you don't have $1 billion, that's very high barrier to entry. And then you need to invest a long time to design it. And then you need a long time to test it. And then you need even longer to market it. So it's a very huge barrier to entry, much higher than the low barrier just selling spaghetti or sandwiches. That's what we're talking with barriers to entry. Threat of substitutes. Many entrepreneurs, they fail to realize that what you think is new and unique, other people think is almost the same as something else. For example, air conditioning is competing with a fan, and it's also competing with cold water or an ice cube in a drink, or opening a window to get a breeze. There's many different competitors. Usually, if you think deeply and look deeply, you will see that there's many different competitors regardless of what you're working at. So I could go through and talk about what are some sales plan or some life planning. Overall, some people say just do whatever you love. I think that's foolish. You should make sure you love it and you have the skills for it, or hire somebody that does have the skill for it, and then make sure there's a market need. And I think I talked to some of our group earlier. I believe the best business plan that most textbooks don't talk about don't involve you. The best business plan, in my opinion, is a system that will work by itself. Some people that I went through my first MBA with, went through three. The first one, actually it was the second MBA, he made a business plan for class activity, and he ended up presenting that to people that turned out to be investors almost by surprise, and he ended up getting a lot of money to hire somebody else to manage his business and develop details. And he was able to sit back while the other people developed the business for him. So think about those things. Here are more details in a business plan to include, more business plans to include. This is usually what investors or judges look at. How innovative is it? How feasible is it? What type of market potential do you have? Me, when I was doing a lot of this, I knew that one of my main customers was the government. And since the government was paying the bill, I understand the government is motivated by how much employment it provides. And so make sure you try to identify the top 20% of customers. What do they want? Some of them may be focused on employment or financial sustainability, entrepreneurial spirit. Do you have that energy? Do you have that fire inside your belly, or the spark, the energy to develop something? Are you motivated? Sometimes the motivation is most important. And then present it well so other people understand. Give an executive summary. Give your business idea description. So these are examples of what judges usually look at. Here's more details about feasibility analysis, what a business plan has. There's lots more details I can go through. I'm not going to waste too much of your time unless you have questions. Financial analysis, assets equals liabilities and owner's equity. A lot of people forget this basic question. And I want to kind of be clear about that and point it out. The idea that when you study accounting, they teach you there's only one way to do things. And you know that your assets and liabilities and owner's equities, you think that's fixed. And you think your revenue and your cost of goods sold, your expenses, you think that's fixed. Well, that's not true. The only thing that's fixed is your revenue. Your expenses depend on how much you want to pay. If you get a lot of revenue and you have paid for your costs, you're going to have a lot of profit. But if you have a lot of profit, at the end of the year, you have to pay a lot of expense in tax. And so smart entrepreneurs don't want to give their valuable money away so they can use that extra money to buy more of the supplies for next year, or hire more staff, or use that so you can say online that you don't have profit, which means you don't have to pay tax. Sometimes the taxes could be 30 or 50%, or sometimes more. So don't forget that big picture.